What's up everybody? In this video we're going to be looking at one of my main lenses for my Nikon kit, and that is the Nikon 35mm f1.4 AIS. So this lens was used by a lot of professionals back in the 70s and 80s. It has great build quality, it's a solid lens, and it performs really well. So in this video, I just want to run through a few things about this lens that I've noticed personally as a film photographer, and that might help you decide whether this lens is right for you. So when looking at the Nikon 35 f1.4s, you have two options. You have the AI version and the AIS. Optically, they're meant to be the same. There might be a coating difference between the very modern AIS lenses and the sort of early AI ones. The only major difference that they have is that the AIS has 9 aperture blades versus 7. So when you stop down, you can get slightly more round bokeh in your out of focus areas. One of the other 35mm lens options that you have is for the f2 version. I have that just here, I'll grab it. So there's also the f2 version, which has 7 aperture blades and also performs quite well. So you have a few options for your 35mm lenses. So let's start off by looking at the price, because there's a pretty drastic difference between these. The AIS, like the modern versions or the most modern versions that they made of this, are pretty expensive. I paid around 800 Australian dollars for this lens. Looking on eBay, you're looking around sort of that 800 to $1,000 is sort of across the average. You might find some slightly cheaper with bits of damage or wear and tear to the body and stuff like that. But I think if you mark it for around $1,000, that's Australian, that's probably where you're going to be. Looking at the AI versions, they're a little bit cheaper, probably around the 600 to 800, getting up to 1,000 if they're really mint. And then the f2 versions, you're looking around sort of 250 to 400. I got this one here for around, I think, $320 or so dollars, something like that. So yeah, big difference in price when you're looking at these lenses. So with this difference in price, is there a difference in performance? If you're shooting film, I don't really think there's that much difference. I haven't noticed this being, sharper or this being sharper when stopped down to sort of your f2s, your f2.8s, 5.6s, stuff like that. But what I have noticed is this lens, the 1.4, is pretty soft when it's wide open. So if you're looking for something that you can shoot wide open, it's pretty soft. Most old vintage 1.4 lenses were quite soft when they were wide open. But when you stop this lens down, it immediately gets sharp, it gets contrasty, and it's very nice. I like the results I get with this. I've also not had any problems or not disliked any of the results I've got with this. They both have distortion, barrel distortion, so you get a little bit of a bend in your horizons, and if you have straight lines from buildings and stuff, you can get a little bit of bend in those. I haven't noticed it being too different. They seem pretty similar, and I'm not shooting architecture and stuff like that. I mainly shoot sort of lifestyle, portraits, and general walk around documentary style landscape stuff. So for me, distortion's not the end of the world. But yeah, they both definitely have it. The size is another thing. There's a difference in size here. The 35mm f1.4 is a lot chunkier, a lot thicker. The f2 is just that bit smaller. So if you're wanting potentially the smallest lens to have for your kit, then maybe the f2 is for you. Just a little bit smaller. Nothing too crazy. The f1.4 isn't massive, and I have it on an f3, which is, a pretty hefty manual SLR as well, so it doesn't make it feel giant or anything like that. So I'm going to throw up a bunch of photos that I've taken with this lens here, so you get a feel of what it looks like, how it performs, if you like it, and then after that we'll talk about it a little bit more.
Wait, tell me what to do.
So I hope you like those photos. Comment down below which ones were your favorites. And if you've used this lens, comment down below as well. Any information is always good information to have out there. Have you had good results with this lens? Do you love it? Do you hate it? What have you found? So would I recommend this 35mm f1.4 to people? The short answer is probably not. This 35mm f2 performs pretty similarly at f2, 2.8 at matching apertures. It performs pretty similarly. It's smaller. They both have a bit of distortion. The one thing I find is just the price. This is a lot cheaper and a lot more readily available in sort of cheaper ones. It's just an expensive lens. Is it a good lens? Yes, I really like this lens. I think at f1.4, the softness doesn't bother me as I shoot a lot of portraits. I think it gives a really interesting sort of semi-glowy, dreamy sort of look. I quite like it. I don't mind that. If you were shooting it with digital, it might also be good because then it gives you that more vintage feel. Might be nice for video, get that nice sort of, almost like you have a pro mist or a filter on there, just that nice soft dreamy effect. So yeah, it has that nice feel. But with the price, I find it hard to recommend. Around 1,000 Australian dollars, it's a lot of money. If you're someone that really likes lenses and you like sort of legacy glass, those 1.4s, the 1.2s, the really nice, interesting, big, old professional lenses, then yeah, this is great. This performs really well. I'm really happy with it. A little bit soft wide open, but most of them are at that sort of, those apertures and those sort of lenses. So yeah, that is what it is. The one difference I will say, and it's not necessarily these lenses or this lens's fault, it's just a problem with focusing with SLRs. When you get slightly wider angle lenses, the sort of lower the aperture is, so the less background blur you get, the harder it is to focus. I did notice I missed a few shots focusing with this, because in that mid, close to when you're at infinity focus, but just in range, there's barely any indication of whether the subject is in focus. So it's similar when you get 28 f2.8s and things like that. I find it harder to focus with this one as compared to this one. It's not necessarily a problem of this lens, it's just a problem of wider lenses in general on SLRs. But if you take your time, if you're not doing super snappy, quick photography of documentary stuff, then it might not affect you at all. You might be able to take your time, really focus in and work on it. But I just found this 35 f1.4 just that little bit easier to focus with. So anyway, I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I have a lot more videos coming out in the future with other Nikon lenses, medium format stuff, all sorts of film photography content. And let me know in the comments down below if you have any more information about this lens, if you've used it, if you have a better alternative. I know there are a lot of similar lenses, the Voigtlander 40mm f2, there's other 35mm, there's f3.5s, I think there's f2.8s. There's all sorts of different lenses in this area, but these are just two that I think are very similar because they're both AIS, they're that manual focus style, and they're vintage Nikon lenses. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one.